Welcome to the Choosing Cheer podcast, the show about the joy of Jesus in all of life's moments. I'm your host, Nicolet Bell, and my hope is that you'll see his joy is not dependent on circumstances, but rooted in his presence. Let's go there together. Hey friends, welcome back to the podcast. I'm very excited as we are continuing our Summer of Service series as we are talking about and listening to stories of people who are choosing cheer and spreading cheer through serving others. And I have a very special guest on the podcast with me today. Timmy Ruhnke is with us. And Timmy, I've had the privilege of serving with you and alongside of you since I was in the 7th grade.
That's right. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So I'm very excited to have you a part of this conversation. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, well, I'm honored to be here, and thanks for inviting me back on. And just got to say, it's been a joy to watch how the Lord's blessed this podcast and your efforts, and just excited to have a conversation with you today.
Yeah, Timmy and his wife, Nicole, were one of my very first guests on the podcast. So it is really, really cool to get to have you back on today. Okay, so we are talking about service and what that looks like for you specifically. But for those that don't know you, I think we should start by you just telling us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, no, great question. And married to my wife, Nicole, and we've been married
She's
for...
one of my favorite people in the whole world.
Yeah, she's pretty great. Been married for 15 years. We have a sweet little girl, Indy. She's a little over 2 years old, and it is just full speed ahead.
She and Josie are friends.
That's right. And same season of life, and it's just a lot of fun. And maybe there'll be some chance to bring up some stories about that later. But yeah, so we've been married for 15 years. Nicole serves and works at the University of Southern Miss to the top. And she's the chief communication officer there. And then for the past couple of years, I've been serving as the president of an international missions organization called Baptist Medical Dental Mission International. Most folks just know it by the acronym, the letters BMDMI. So that's our life.
Yeah, and y'all are undergoing kind of like a brand change
That's
too,
right,
with the organization.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we're in a kind of a strategic plan, and part of that was to have a branding initiative to, just to have a name, a brand that one kind of maintains the rich history of who we are, but also makes it a little bit more clear of our scope and our calling and those type things.
Right. Yeah. Because we joke, I think you told me before, so I am not Baptist have traveled with BMDMI lots of times.
That's right.
And I'm not medical or dental and have traveled with BMDMI lots of times. So, the name kind of has some criteria that maybe aren't exactly reflective of the whole ministry.
And it's neat because this year is 50 years that we've been established as an international missions organization, which is amazing. Statistically, it's just by God's grace alone. But in that was when it did start, that was at the core, 50 years ago when they were thinking about what do we call ourselves? They're like, well, at the very core 50 years ago, it was Baptist folks that were doing medical and dental work in Honduras at that time. And so the name was real specific to, exactly what the scope of the ministry was. But now God's just blessed the ministry in so many ways that, like you said, you don't necessarily have to be Baptist to be a part of it. We do way more than medical and dental work. And so, we're excited to release, if you will, unveil the name in January.
Well, that's exciting. So my very first foreign mission trip was with you. And your wife, Nicole.
Right.
When I was a senior in high school, we went to Honduras. Was that your first mission?
That was our first trip.
That's what I thought.
That's right.
I was trying to remember that. So all of our eyes were just really opened on that trip, but specifically for you and Nicole, it really was. Really shaped the way that you began to live the rest of your life. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. It really did. We had already started sensing a call to global missions, and we had surrendered to the call of ministry, which is a huge milestone because I joked that when Nicole and I got married, she didn't marry a pastor or someone in ministry. She just married this guy named Timmy who loved the Lord and was growing in his faith or whatever. But anyhow, so we were sensing a call to global missions because our eyes were open to the reality of unreached people groups. And that was just like when God got my attention with that, there was no turning back. So with that came the opportunity to go to Honduras with that team. And so when we went, it literally just solidified everything we felt like the Lord was calling us to do, to be on foreign soil, to serve God. And I remember thinking one of the last days of that trip, Nicole and I were sitting down, whatever that last village we were in, I can't remember. We were just sitting down. Everybody was tired, exhausted. We're hot, been eating rice and beans all week, all those type things. And I was like, for some reason, we're going without majority of the amenities that we're used to. So we're kind of out of our comfort zone, all those type things.
Particularly then, I feel like it was even more so than now traveling.
That's
because
right.
some of the third world countries have kind of caught up a little bit in some aspects. Yeah.
But we woke up every single day to just live on mission. Even though we didn't have all the amenities, it was that thought and that reality. I was like, I feel more alive right now in this moment than I have my entire life, especially the last few years of my faith journey. And that's just when it clicked that when we're in the center of God's will, doing what He's called and created us to do, there's nothing more liberating. There's nothing more joyful. And so, it was just 1 week where we were down there without all the amenities, if you would, but we just felt more alive than we've ever felt before. And I think that was the moment where everything just solidified. Yeah, It was a good trip.
Yeah, it was a great trip. And that you're talking about, that feeling of just waking up and just knowing what you're going to do that day. And really, that's what we're made for. And
it is.
So when we do it, we just feel the favor of God and the pleasure of God with us. And it really does make you come alive in a way that it's just hard to explain.
It is.
When all the distractions are removed.
That's right.
And you're just there for a single purpose. So to me, you've really lived kind of a life dedicated to service and particularly global missions. Have tried. And what have you learned along the way? It's been a whole journey getting here.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And I think we could take the rest of the time to talk about that. But, as I've kind of processed and thought through just trying our best to be faithful to what God's called us to do, I think the way I would summarize it is just simply saying that in the economy of God, obedience is never wasted. So in God's economy, doing what He's called us to do, that those small acts of obedience, sometimes the big acts of obedience, like it's never wasted. I believe at times, yes, it's going to require sacrifice. It's going to, cause some hardships along the way. It might look different than the world and the culture that we live in, and all of that's okay. And because it's to be expected that obedience will require sacrifice. It will require some hardships and difficulties, but is it worth it? 1,000%. And, I just think and just imagine that when we're on the other side of this world in eternity with Christ for just say 10,000 years, we're going to look back on this small moment that God gave us in human history. And I don't think we'll ever look back and say, I was a little too faithful, or I was a little too obedient.
Yeah.
And, and so I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned. And then the other part of that is, I think the second thing I've learned is obedience doesn't have to be complicated, because not all folks are called to live on foreign soil and take these massive steps. And, I think a simple example is like with Indy. She's 2 years old, and we're trying to instill some biblical principles and framework for her day, which I know is a lot for a 2-year-old to try to soak in, but we have a statement we say every morning, and we say the Ruhnke family will do these 3 things. And we've tried to simplify it for Indy, but I think it also speaks to us as adults. And so we say, Indy, what are the 3 things we're going to do every day? And she'll answer, and she'll say, we're going to obey. We're going to let our light shine. She learned about that in Sunday school. And we're going to have fun. And I think that is what it's like to follow Christ and to live a life that's focused on people, even in adults, meaning like we obey God, we submit to his lordship. We want to let our light shine. We want to be able to serve people in the mundane moments of life, meaning it doesn't have to be on foreign soil. It can be in your office. It can be at home. It can be in Walmart, just thinking of ways that we can truly be kind and have a service mind and to love people and to serve people. And then to have fun. Sometimes we take life too serious. I know I'm guilty of that a lot. But man, life is such a gift and for us to enjoy it. And one of the best ways to do it is by submitting to God and by trying to let our light shine, and so I don't know, if I could summarize what I've learned, it would be those two things.
That's really, really
and
good.
still learning.
Yeah, still learning along the way. Yeah, that's
right.
really, really good. But that emphasis on obedience is so important, and not to overcomplicate it, right? I think we sometimes can get paralyzed in our service of just waiting for exact
That's
instructions
exactly right.
and whatever. And when we look in the Word, if we're reading the Word, we see God has laid out a lot of commands for us in Scripture in regards to service, particularly feeding the hungry, clothing the hungry, giving drink to the hungry or to the thirsty, and caring for those that don't have homes, caring for orphans, caring for widows, all of those types of things. And this will kind of transition us into the next part of our conversation, because I've been reading the Gospels this year kind of on repeat, and just really studying the life of Jesus. And when I was reading through the passage where he talks about what you will do to the least of these, you have done unto me, and what you have not done to the least of these, you did not do unto me. And I began to write those statements out in the form of a question. And I've talked about this on the podcast before because it was really so impactful to me. And as I was reading through those questions back to myself, where am I feeding people? Where am I giving people clothes? Where am I providing this for people? That kind of thing. And so I began to ask those questions back to myself, and I just kept looking at them. I would stare at them where I had written them out. And I kept thinking, like, that's an orphan. Like, that is describing an orphan. And we know different parts in Scripture talks about orphans. And so I just began to pray for orphans. And I began to pray about how the Lord wants me to answer those questions in the form of an orphan. And I had talked with a couple of local organizations and different things, which I think are all great things. But when I would talk to them, I just really wouldn't feel like that's what I was supposed to do or what I was supposed to do. I don't know how to really explain it except just really a knowing in my
spirit. Great ministry, but it wasn't just what you felt like the Lord was calling you to be a part of.
Right. Yeah. And so I've been praying this prayer every day for a couple of months. And Nicole, your wife, calls me out of the blue and says, hey, I want you to think about going to Nicaragua with us to a girl's home. She told me the date, and I was like, that's really not a good date for me. Like, that date is not really going to work.
Yeah, I remember that.
For
it was
me,
in the middle of a lot of things.
Yes, there was like 3 things big happening in my life right around there. And I'm like, this is really not a good date for me. But I told her, I said, I've been praying about this for 3 months. And when I hung up the phone with her, it was just like I knew that's what I was supposed to do. So it's kind of like whatever needed to happen, I was gonna go on this trip. It was like a direct answer to my prayer. I felt like God was just going like, this is what I want you to do. And so we traveled to Nicaragua in April. And it was a very last minute trip, right? Like, I think we knew about it maybe a month in advance, which is very rare for foreign mission
We were
trips.
waiting on a couple key dominoes to fall, if you would, without getting into too much detail. And so then when it did, we had a list of folks that we had already been praying through of like, okay, if this domino falls, we need to ask, these 10 people or whatever. And you were right at the top of the list.
Yeah, well, it was an incredible trip. Why don't you tell, because you'll tell better than I will, tell everybody, what is the Emmanuel Home? How does it kind of fit into your network? We've talked a little bit about BMDMI.
Yeah.
What is the Emmanuel Home?
Yeah, so the Manual Home of Protection is a ministry of BMDMI. It's located in Nicaragua, and it's a really just unique and beautiful ministry, which you saw. And what it is it is a home for girls that have been rescued from trafficking and sexually abusive situations. And so it's not, we work with the government. So the government's the one that places the girls in the home. So we're not on the front lines doing the rescuing, but we're on the restoration side of it. And what's unique about it is in Nicaragua, the Manual Home is the only home, the ministry that is open for that specific of type of abuse and background. And so we're the only ministry that's still open doing in that and kind of standing in the gap, if you would, for those girls. And so what happens is the girls will come to the Manual Home and just have experienced evil, I think, at its just worst form. You know, not to get into what that world is like, but they've just been up against some of the worst type of evil that I think is present in 2024. And so they come, and oftentimes they have a little kid. These girls, teenage girls, 12, 13 years old, they'll have a baby as a result of the abuse. And a lot of times when they get dropped off, they don't have a suitcase. They don't have, it's literally the clothes on their back and the baby in their hand. And that's how they come in the gate of the Manual Home. And then our mission, if you would, what we feel called to do is to provide a safe place, one, for these girls to reside. And then we want to help lean in to restore the girls from a mentally, emotionally, and spiritual level to where they're in a safe environment, to where they can get education. We have a psychologist on staff that helps them process what they've done. And then everything we do is Christian-based. And so they have experienced this abuse from men. And really what we have a hard time navigating is then how to point them to a loving father. When sometimes it was the father who did the abuse, right?
Right.
And so there's just so many amazing stories of that and testimonies of how God's been at work. And really that's what the Manual Home is to stand in the gap for these girls, to provide a safe place for them to be restored mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And Lord willing, to learn some trades along the way, so when it's time for them to exit, they have a chance to make it.
Yeah. I really, you had been to the Manual Home several times before you took us to go this last time. And I don't think anything really could have prepared me. I knew what we were walking into. I'd been told knowledge-wise what we were walking into, but to actually walk in and see a 12-year-old holding their baby. As a mom, I know how hard it is for me to care for my child, and I'm a grown woman, right? I can't imagine having that weight at that age, plus all of the trauma that these young women have been through, really what we would call children in our society, not even teenagers. And so just the weight of what they had experienced up until that point, and really their daily struggle, but at the same time, their simultaneous joy that they exude and experience and interacting with us and being able to do. We did some fun activities with them while we were there, and to get to see them kind of, just be kids for a little while, it just shattered me. To me, it's like the best way that I could know. I told myself I wasn't going to cry when we were doing this, but it just really changed the way that I saw the world. Like you said, it's the worst. Really, the worst kind of evil.
And the thing that did it for me, and this was probably about a year ago, and so I've been with BMDMI for a while. I've known of the Manual Home it's been in existence for 15 years. So I've known about it since I've been going to Nicaragua, which has probably been for over a decade. But anyhow, when I was there, and spent some substantial amount of time there. And when we were leaving, as you know, they like to do what they call a closing presentation. And really what it is they want to sing a song and try to have some dance that goes along with it. And so a lot of these girls were, passing off their babies and those type things. And so I was holding this little boy. He was 4 months old. And I was holding this boy and watching his mom, who was 12, do their performance, if you would, their dance. And then I noticed the song that they were playing was Waymaker. And the moment that one of those moments that you just won't ever forget, I guess is the best way to describe it, is when I was standing there holding this 4-month-old little kid and the 12-year-old mama that had experienced this abuse was testifying to the goodness of God. And at that point, it was like, yes, we have to stand in the gap and to see this thing through. You know what I mean? Because you see they come in, can't even look you in the eye because of the things that they've experienced. To
terror and just afraid and shame and all the things.
Being able to stand in front of a group of strangers and testify to the goodness of God. It doesn't happen overnight. And, there's not always success stories.
There's good days and bad days for each girl from what we experience.
That's right.
Sometimes they look at their baby and love them, and other times they look at their baby and they can't feel love towards them in that moment. And they just walk that up and down, just the journey that they're on. It's just really kind of up and down, but then that they can still stand and.
Yep, it is. And, there's so many stories I could tell, but one from a girl, we'll just call her Elizabeth, keep her name, protected. But, she came to the Manual home many, many years back, and she came when she was about 12. And when she was there, she got education. She was way behind in education because most of the time when you're in those type of situations, you're not getting to go to school.
Right.
So we have a Christian school about 15 minutes down the road. So she ended up graduating high school. While she was at the Manual home, she heard about the love of God. She became a believer. She put her faith in Jesus. And then she had a sponsor when she got out of the home. And so she ended up going to 5 years of college there in Nicaragua. And she became a lawyer, you know what I mean? And it was just almost like a second chance at life. And so there are some just amazing stories like that. This past November, a few of the girls put their faith in Jesus. And so they brought this massive water tub out to the Manual home, if you could call it that. And got to celebrate with a few of the girls that put their faith in Jesus.
Baptized.
And so there are some amazing stories like that where you see the full circle of restoration take place. And then there's some stories that, it's just difficult days. And
I think that while we were there, we saw some immediate needs. That was one of the reasons we were going, was to look for immediate needs, but also, and we can talk more about this in a bit, but really looking at long-term sustainability for the home and for the ministry. And so really a vision trip is what we were on, of dreaming and imagining of the ways that God wants to support and to continue the work that's being done there. But one of the immediate needs that we noticed was that they did not have anywhere to clean the babies.
That's right.
Right? So they had showers. They didn't have any bathtubs in the home. It was all showers. Because when the home was built, the ministry didn't know at the time that they would be receiving young women with babies. It just kind of evolved into that as the need presented itself. And so, we're seeing they're not bathing the babies very often, and that's part of that's cultural. And then another part is just they didn't really have anywhere to clean the babies. Nobody's really taught them how to clean the babies.
They haven't been taught.
But that's important for the baby.
Yeah.
And so babies are using cloth diapers and they're not getting baths every day and, all of this. And so our team sees like, okay, we need a baby cleaning area in the house, whether we need a bathtub or what that looks like. And we knew that a couple of people on our team, including you, were going back to Nicaragua in May. So tell us a little bit about that project and how it kind of came to fruition.
Yeah, it was, it happened a lot quicker than I thought it would because the last night of the vision trip, we were just like, okay, well, yes, we're committed to the long-term sustainability of the home and figuring that out, but you just can't overlook all the other needs along the way. And so that was the one that kind of rose to the top. And so everybody was gracious to donate the funds to cover that. And really what happened was because once we knew we had enough funds and we had a budget for it, I was back in the States here in Hattiesburg trying to work through and explain kind of what this could look like, a wash area for the babies. And so we're drawing stuff out on note cards, and I'm FaceTiming with the people in Nicaragua. And it took a little while of trying to explain exactly what could work and how we could use that space without like tearing down walls and all that type of stuff. And then when we went back at the end of May to see it in its final form, it was unbelievable. It took basically a shower, stand-up shower if you would, and then on the other end of the stand-up shower built kind of like a wash
kind of like
basin.
Like
I don't know how to explain it.
I don't know if people have been to like a dog wash station. I don't know if they have them. They have them here in Jackson. I don't know. It just could be like a city bougie thing. I'm not sure. But people will like take their dogs to a dog washing station. Yeah. And it's like elevated. That's and you wash the dogs. So it's kind of like a baby washing.
It is.
Station. That's the best way to describe it.
Yep. So the girl doesn't have to like bend over all the way to the ground, but it's an elevated.
And it has a hose, like a wand.
Where they can wash and do all of that. And so now they'll get, soap and water baths and those type things. And but it just goes to show that it was like a simple, what we would see as a simple need. And inexpensive. In
American dollars.
That's right.
Yeah.
But it went a long ways. And I thought that our team was going to have to go down and finish, like the tile work, kind of the final product of it, to finish it up. And but when we got there, it was done. And they were just so excited to be able to have that. I mean, I wish it had been those moments to see, like you could have seen the director's face when she was letting us walk in to see
showing
it.
You. Yeah, the pride.
The pride and the joy, and just for them to share what a great opportunity this is to teach them now better hygiene and those type things for the kids. And anyhow, just a huge blessing.
That's so cool. That's awesome. So you went back with that group in May, and I told you I was watching all the pictures everybody was posting, because Preston and I were originally supposed to be on that team, and then we didn't get to make the trip. But y'all did something really cool. Tell us about what you did, just because I think that is super fun. Y'all got to do a cool excursion.
Yeah, so the last day is kind of the free day for most of the teams. And Nicaragua is the only place in the world that I know of that you can, they call it volcano surfing / volcano boarding down an active volcano. And so
we would see, when we were in Nicaragua, like we could see the smoke coming out of the volcano kind of from wherever you were.
That's right.
That's funny.
And so our team was a bunch of young adults, some college students, and it had the makeup to where it was like, okay, maybe we can make it all down it safely and not get injured, because some teams that are older just can't do it.
It's not an option.
So I called our team in the country and I was like, hey, look, what are the chances that we could do this? And they said, no one's ever done it before. And I was like, okay, well, we're going to try it out. And so we went, and it was as adrenaline sketchy operation that you could imagine. So we hiked up the volcano, beautiful views, because it was active. So you had black volcanic rock on this volcano, but you look across to the next mountain range, if you would, and it's green. So it's this beautiful black and gray volcano you're on, but then the next ridge over is lush green. And so to see all of that together is just amazing.
Yeah.
And then you're in this suit, and there's all these bees at the top of the volcano that kept stinging people. And the guide kept saying, oh, don't worry, the bees don't sting. And I'm like, yes, buddy, they do.
They do, actually.
They do. Yeah. But you get in this suit, and then you wear the basically like snowboarding ski goggles, if you would, and then you're placed on this piece of plywood that's about 12, 14 inches wide and 3 foot long, and it's got this little rope and a handle that you hold on to, and you just lean back and you go. And all of their descriptions about it say you can reach like 90 kilometers an hour, which I think is like 60 miles an hour or whatever. And and it was incredible. Nobody got too badly
seriously injured.
Yeah. But it was a great experience. It was a lot of fun.
Well, Preston and I were super jealous when we saw that part of the trip. Not that we wouldn't have loved the other part of the trip, but we loved that part. But I do have to make a disclaimer. You told me no more teams will be doing the volcano sledding. That was a one and done deal for that team. But that's a really cool experience. You'll have to do that on your own if you want to go to Nicaragua and do that by yourself.
That's right, because I don't know that our insurance
you don't have enough insurance to cover that. Yeah.
So
what a fun experience.
Yeah, our field director said, y'all are the first team to do it. And I said, and the last.
And the last
This is not a viable option anymore.
That is so funny. Let's talk back to the Emmanuel Home, because I'm a part of the Emmanuel Home of Protection Task Force that we've kind of formed out of this trip that we took, that are really serving as advocates for the home and for the ministry. So let's talk a little bit about what the needs are in the home. Because we went down there really to evaluate the ministry that was happening, what was happening. Is it worth continuing? We all unanimously say, absolutely 100%. Let's work to get this funded, because right now it's not. It's underfunded.
Yeah, so it is underfunded. And I think the biggest need is, I would put awareness and prayer in the same bucket, because I think they go hand in hand.
Yes.
Because I don't think you can give awareness to the ministry without praying for the ministry. And so I think those kind of go hand in hand. And so part of it is just awareness and prayer, because there's been, a very popular movie that's come out about trafficking and those type things.
Yes.
And so I believe that trafficking is on a lot of people's radar now, whereas, 5 years ago, people just didn't really want to believe it existed. But now you can't, you can't move past the reality that it does exist, right? But I think that's where it stops for a lot of folks, is because they don't know what ministries. They just know that it's a global issue of trafficking, but they don't know where to start.
Yeah, it just seems overwhelming.
It is.
It's massive. It's this whole system. What could I possibly do?
That's right.
To fight it or to help it.
And so awareness in the sense of, there is a home in Nicaragua where a lot of this happens. I mean, the Sound of Freedom movie that was made was headquarters in the next country over, Tegucigalpa in Honduras. That was where the opening and closing scene was. And so, Latin American countries, Central America, has a lot of this that goes on. Which
are our neighbors.
That's right.
They are our neighbors.
Literally. Yeah. And so I think when you take it from a global issue and you bring it all the way down to, there is a home that I'm made aware of that I can pray for, then it gets personal, because you're not, and I'm not saying that global like blanket prayers don't matter, because they do, right? They 100% do. But also
we're not as usually as consistent with those, though, right?
That's right.
Because they're not personal
to
us.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so then when you're made aware of a particular home, and the one that we have is the Emmanuel Home in Nicaragua, then it becomes personal, and then you really feel like your prayers have more substance to it. You know what I mean? And so I think the first thing would be through awareness and prayer. That's one of the biggest needs, because we know apart from the power of prayer, like, it's the foundation of everything. You know what I mean? Just pleading with God to protect and to heal and to help, and then you move into the next big category would most likely be the funding. I mean, it's a nonprofit. We do work with the government there, but it's in the sense of the government's the one that places the girls with us and then determines when they're released. But the funding and the sustainability of the home is 100% dependent on just individual normal folks like me and you that are donating to it.
Yeah.
It's not a government subsidized program.
Right.
It's it's really hard for grants and those type things to come out. Hopefully in the years ahead, there'll be more grants for stuff like that. But, right now the manual home doesn't have any grants, you know what I mean? And so it's fully dependent on the generosity of folks that are donating towards that home. Because it's not what the manual home does is they live there. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And they're there. That's their home.
The staff. Yeah.
That's right.
They're invested fully.
It's not diminishing, because we have feeding programs. We have all these different ministries that we do, but it's not a feeding program. It's not an education program, but it's funding a home where feeding happens, where psychological care happens, where they get access to a medical doctor once a month, where they get access to education, where they get access to trade opportunities, to learn different types of trades. And so, the funding that goes to the manual home literally is creating a safe place for them to live and for them to be restored. And that's kind of what it's towards.
Yeah. So I want people to know that really kind of we won't get into the details, but what the budget that the home is operating on would really be almost laughable in American dollars. Like how much they are able to do.
That's right.
With the little resources that they have.
That's right.
Blows my mind.
Yeah.
It's incredible to see them stewarding the gifts that they have been given to make an impact for these young women. Yeah,
so it's, like you said, without getting to the details, but just to help people kind of process, we have a capacity for 30, which is girls and babies total, based off of the staff. So, for 30 girls and babies to be there, plus the staff, plus the medical care, plus the education, plus the transport to, all the stuff, the food, everything that goes into it, the operating budget is probably equivalent to the average household income for a household of 5 in the U.S., if not less, depending on your jobs and those type things.
Yeah.
And there's so much that we would like to see done.
Yeah.
But the budget right now, to be a good steward of the resources, we are meeting the most immediate kind of basic needs along the way. We have dreams and aspirations to develop programs and to have other components of the ministry. But first and foremost is we want to make sure that we have a space for these girls to come into. And that's our end goal.
Yeah. And just walking the halls and seeing these girls that have come out of these abusive situations, or, we look at other homes in Nicaragua and Honduras and surrounding countries, and you see they've never had a room to themselves. Like, it's so foreign to, my daughter's about to get a big girl bed. And I've been thinking about what kind of bed does she want? And what color comforter do I want on it? And like planning and thinking about those things. Yeah. And then I think back to these girls' rooms. They were so proud to just have a bed and a wall that they could put their artwork up on, right? My child's artwork is all over my refrigerator and in frames. And, we just have a hard time even beginning to think about these circumstances that they're in. But that at the home, they have a bed.
They do.
They have artwork.
Yep.
They have a place to put it. They have people that care to see what they're doing. Just the kind of transformation and just having that space, having that bed. Yeah. That is theirs. That is a safe place. It's just completely transformative for these young women.
It really is. And that's the overwhelming response from the girls. Like, every time like I get to leave and I'm leaving there, or whatever the case might be, they all say bye, we're going to miss you, those type things. But then you always have a handful that come up and Spanish, they're saying thank you, and they'll, if you talk to a translator with them, they're just saying thank you for, having the manual home and helping us have a place to be safe. And because it's kind of the place where they have a chance to be restored, to have a second shot at life,
So while we were at the home, Timmy, you asked me to lead a devotional, a Bible study for the girls while we were there. And as I was kind of preparing for that, I'm thinking and praying and just going, God, I don't even know what to say to them because I have not experienced anything close
That's right.
to what these girls have experienced. And so I just prayed and prayed, and I was trying to come up with something new and fresh and whatever. And I just was asking God, and it was getting a little close to time. I'm like, okay, Lord, like show me. And finally, I think I was recording a podcast one day, and I went, that's the message. It's the verse that we talk about again here week after week on the podcast, and being able to share it with them in Nicaragua really gave it a new meaning to me and a deeper understanding of this whole concept of choosing cheer that we talk about, because Jesus is talking to his disciples in John 16:33, and he tells them, in the world you will have trouble. Not you might, not there's a possibility, but like you will.
That's right.
And I got to stand there and say that to that group of girls.
Yeah.
And I think that can be so freeing, because so often in culture and our understanding of God and how he works can be a little skewed, where we think we've done something that has brought this trouble.
That's right.
Or we deserve this trouble. And Jesus is just saying, like, there's just trouble.
That's right. It's
in
a
the
broken world.
We live in a broken world. And saying that and looking at their faces, man, it just felt very close to trouble.
Yeah.
The real trouble that there is in the world, the tangible evil.
Yep.
But at the same time, the second part of that verse, but be of good cheer because I have overcome the world. Right. And I was able to look out into that group of girls and go, gosh, this is one step. Like, God, this is one way that you are bringing your kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven. You are righting the wrong. You are taking that trouble and you are turning it into joy. And it's still going to be trouble, and it's still going to be hard, and they're going to have good days and bad days. But, man, he has overcome the world. And the end of time, there will be no more evil. There will be no more tears. There will be no more hurt. And to be able to tell them that, and if you put your faith and trust in Jesus, there can be joy even in these really, really hard moments. So it just deepened the understanding of what I get to do and talk about on a weekly basis, but really just kind of made it hit home for me in a new way. So it was really a true gift.
Which, that's one of the reasons that I believe that global missions is so important. I don't think that it's an either or thing. Like, do I just focus on local missions, or I do global missions, or do I go be a missionary, or do I stay here? It's not either or, it's both and. And wherever our feet are planted, let's be actively serving and ministering to people, right? So your feet are planted all across different facets of work and those type things. So, like we tell Indy, be salt and light, you know what I mean? We
shine your light. Yeah. Shine your light.
Shine your light. Let your light shine. And then, but also too, when you stand on foreign soil, I believe what it does is it completely changes like your biblical worldview. When I say foreign soil, let me also classify that in the sense of serving the Lord. And I'm not against foreign vacations. Take them. I take them. I want to take them.
Right.
But when you're out in a village serving God on foreign soil, your view of God, your understanding of the Word of God and his global story of redemption, like it changes so much about your life. And that's why I think one of the greatest things that you can do in your faith journey is to get on foreign soil at least for a week and let God open your eyes and your heart to the reality that he is a global God.
Because I think so many people, I've heard people say when I've come back from a trip here or a trip there, well, what difference do you think that's making, you just going for a week? Like, that's not very sustainable, whatever. Well, partnering with a ministry like BMDMI helps make it sustainable because we partner with local churches that, the ministry is continuing whether we're there or not. But truly, it's about the people and it's about what you're serving, but it is also so about us.
That's right.
In the way that God wants to open our eyes and transform the way that we live in our everyday lives as a result of being just in touch with what he's doing around the world. It's just beautiful.
It is.
Well, tell people, Timmy, where can we find you? How can we connect with BMDMI and the Emmanuel Home? So
BMDMI is on Facebook and Instagram. And the easiest way to kind of read about the ministry and see kind of everything that's going on would be through the website. So that's bmdmi.org. And on the website, you can see the different ministries that we have and that we're actively involved in. There's opportunities to become a stakeholder, meaning like to financially invest in any of the ministries, specifically the Emmanuel Home as well. Mm-hmm. And for kind of live stories of, like we call them impact stories, just the way that God's at work and those type things is, most of that you can find on Facebook and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But to learn more about the ministry in and of itself, it'll be through the website.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Timmy, thanks so much for being here. And just a personal thank you for inviting me to go on the trip. Preston and I are partnered in with the Emmanuel Home to help see more girls be restored and brought closer to Jesus through the work that you are leading out. We're behind you and we're cheering you on 100%.
Well, thank you. It's been a blessing to be here. Thank you so much.
Friends, it's my honor and privilege to get to spend time with you week after week. It is such a joy that you would choose to be a part of our conversation here on the podcast. You are such an important part of what we do. If you like what you hear, I would invite you to share it, pass it along, text this episode to a friend, like, rate, and subscribe to our show. What you do makes a difference. And remember, friend, we're cheering you on.